Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering What We Do in the Shadows, Season 3, Episode 5, The Chamber of Judgment. In this episode, we have our first session where Nadja and Nandor have to manage some cases. And frankly, I really wanted to see more of the crazy shit they wind up dealing with. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very, very much to Max for commissioning this episode. What's going on, Max? Thank you for your flexibility as well, as I am, having to reschedule things. But I am really excited that we are getting to see an episode where Guillermo is having a bit of a time, like in a good way. He always has a bit of a time, but usually it's not in a good way. And we also get to see Laszlo's, lawyering, which is interesting how it dovetails at the end, because I was sort of watching it going, it's interesting that he, has this in his history and his ability, although saying that he has the ability, I feel like, is stretching it just a bit. But, it doesn't look like it's going to wind up coming into play officially in any sense. And then, yes, it does. So I'm going to start at the beginning, as we are wont to do. When we have Nandor, it's only Nandor, Guillermo, and Nadja that are going to the tribunal. And it's a very odd scene because, I guess the Vampiric Council located on a certain floor is all you get. And so they don't actually know which way in the tunnels they should go to reach the particular room they need to get to. And Nadja and Nandor are alone, but Guillermo had gotten here 20 minutes earlier. And he startles the hell out of them, but it turns out he wasn't even the first one here. It was Evil Mabel, who is here and makes a lot of threatening comments about how she was standing right behind Guillermo, smelling his musk. I am sorry, but anytime that you say anything about someone's musk, that's a no for me. We're not doing that. I don't think so. It's just not. No. Asher says, Laszlo's lawyering cracked me up and made me cringe so hard at the same time. Yeah, look, this is one of those things that it's a very fine line, and they managed to stay on the side of it that made it still enjoyable to watch. But there's some humor. If it goes too far into cringe territory, I can't handle it. I just can't do it. The secondhand embarrassment is just too much for me. But it didn't quite get to the point where I was just like, I have to tap out, which was good. Season 1 of the British The Office, that's a good example of comedy that I was like, this actually has crossed over into no longer funny to me. So anyway, they are about to head in the wrong direction, but Evil Mabel shows them the right way to go. We get the theme music. And when we come back, we are actually with Laszlo and Colin, who are heading over to Shawnee's place because he's having a boys' night. And Laszlo had hoped that this was like a sexual thing, and it isn't. Colin knows that it's not. And Laszlo starts to catch on that it's not. But I wasn't really sure what we were going to get into here because, when it's described as a boys' night, I'm thinking that maybe there's going to be my thought always goes to sort of bachelor party behavior. So I'm wondering, is there going to be a stripper? What exactly, whenever there have been gatherings with those characters before, it has always been the male and female friends of both of them. And it wasn't like I was suspicious of anything. It was just like, oh, I wonder why. Like, what's this going to be about? And it turns out, this is so great, you guys. So first, when they get here, Laszlo is like, oh, well, you know me. I brought, and I can't even remember what it is that he's got. Did he have booze with him or what? I'm going to go back to that spot, and he opens a box. That's right. And I don't see what's in it. All I can remember, because it was totally overshadowing the thing that Laszlo brought, was that, oh, it's cigars. Okay. Colin brought, I think it's supposed to be like a role-playing mystery game. Now, I don't have anything against this type of game in general. I think with the right crowd, it's excellent, actually, and you can have a lot of fun with it. But I'm just going to go off for a second, you guys, on board games as an activity amongst friends. Again, I have no problem with board games in theory. And I actually think they can be a really good way to break the ice amongst a crowd that doesn't know each other well. But the problem is that there are people for whom a game is is used as a tool to help people feel more comfortable. And then there are people for whom the game is the thing. And that's where you start running into trouble. Because unless you are surrounded by other people for whom the game is the thing, you are always going to be taking it too seriously, and you are going to be frustrated by the folks around you who are not as committed to the rules as you are, or as interested in playing another round as you are. And this is something that I have run into with Owen's family a lot, because Brendan's family didn't really play games. This wasn't so much a thing. We did occasionally we would play Clue. And that's a simple enough game that we had played, all of us had played before, that you don't have to take the time to get to know the rules. It's we all pretty much know how to play, and that's the advantage. And it's the same sort of thing as Cards Against Humanity, where it is such a simple concept that it really doesn't need a lot of explaining. There doesn't have to be a bunch of pauses as you figure things out. There aren't a ton of pieces. It's just the cards, and it's a really straightforward concept. And that's why it's so popular, because it's simple enough that you can play it while you're drunk, while you're stoned, or while you're just fucking feeling lazy after a Thanksgiving dinner. Owen's grandparents introduced me to Settlers of Catan, which is definitely a more complex game. But it's the kind of thing that they play pretty much every time we get together. And so even though it is complex, I only had to learn it the one time. And then after, that's what we play every time we get together. And since we all know the rules because we've been playing together, it becomes our thing. And it's part of just how we spend time together. But unfortunately, Owen's parents had a very different relationship with board games. And for them, the games were the thing. And they didn't understand that when we played a board game with his grandparents, it was because we all know it. And it's just a nice way to enjoy ourselves together. And his parents always wanted to bring in a new game and make us learn a new game. And I cannot emphasize enough how much I hate learning a new game. I hate it. And it's made a lot worse by the fact that now it's only Owen's mother, and she is extremely bad at explaining how the games go. And the last 2 times she's taught us a new game, she actually had the rules wrong, and we didn't know until about halfway through because shit was not making sense. So, and she gets very offended and kind of sulky if we don't play whatever new thing she has brought with her. But it is absolute agony. It is so tedious and so excruciatingly slow moving when you don't know the rules and when the person teaching you is kind of uncertain of themselves as well. It is just the surest way for me to want to leave is to suggest that we all learn a new game. And that is just like a regular board game. When you decide that you're going to bring a role-playing game to a group that hasn't, like, they are not, as far as we know, familiar with the concept of playing this sort of game, that is a very specific type of gameplay that, unless folks understand the sort of principle behind what you're doing, it can be very hard to get across that you're sort of pretending to be a character and that the way you play the character is actually going to influence the game itself. And, you know, as somebody who only ever played D&D one time before, like, I actually went and played with a bunch of people, it was probably very hard for them to enjoy themselves when I was clearly, like, not getting it. And the fact that Colin brings this, it just got to me. It really did, because it is so perfect. The kind of things that Colin feeds off of. They always, for me, I'm like, oh, I get it. That would be something that would drive me nuts or be really, like, frustrating or whatever. This is the first time where it really, just the thought of what he was bringing to the table here, literally and figuratively, made me feel like the kind of anxiety and frustration that I think he could have fed off of from the pure concept of it. You know, I hate it so much. And, like, again, I have nothing against games in practice. And there are plenty of games that it's going to be so painful for me to learn it. But once I do, I'm like, oh, this game is actually super fun and I like it. It doesn't matter, though. It's always awful the first couple times you play, especially the very first time. And these guys are obviously, like, except for Shawnee, they had all been intending to sort of just chill out and have some beers and smoke some cigars and enjoy themselves. And Colin wants to bring in this very structured thing that requires a lot of brain power. And that's not how any of them are planning on spending their time. But it turns out that's not even what the evening is going to be. I thought we were going to watch the rest of this evening turn out to be the various ridiculous role playing that everybody, like, engaged in, and how silly it was and how uncomfortable it all was. And it's not. Instead, it's all about Shawnee trying to sell these pillows. The guy pillow, I think is what it's called. This is so awful, y'all. Now, so we all, I think, in the past few years have started to get wise to the pyramid scheme type thing and how it works. But, you know, 10, 15 years ago, I think it was, like, still kind of flying under the radar how many businesses were built this way. And so people were really getting tricked a lot more consistently than they are now. And I was amongst them. And this is part of me, like, starting to realize that working hard wasn't getting me anywhere. Like, the businesses that I worked for, they don't promote, they don't pay you more. There was no real reward to doing my best. And I started to be like, isn't there another way? And I eventually found the podcast and figured out how to make a living with this. But I was attempting other things, trying to just see what happened. And one of them was Avon, selling Avon products. And I really should have known that I wasn't going to be that great at it, because I am not a pushy person in the sense of, like, I will be pushy about things that I genuinely believe in. You know, I will be very pushy about my ideals and morals, and just, you know, the only thing that I will be genuinely pushy on that doesn't actually affect, like, human rights is food. I'll be pretty pushy about how I feel about food. And we know that doesn't actually matter, but it does matter, and that's fine. But I can't even like stand up to a snotty nail tech when I'm getting a manicure. I don't know how I thought I was going to be able to be a salesperson. And especially amongst people that you know, like, because you're encouraged to sort of engage your friends in whatever it is you're trying to sell in this exact way. And I did the thing that is the classic first mistake. And I bought a bunch of inventory thinking that I would then offload the inventory. And that's how they make their profit. It is not through actual customers. It is through salespeople buying inventory and then getting stuck with it. That's the way they make their money. So Shawnee here has this pillow thing, and it is such an awkward scene where he's attempting to like naturally insert the pillow into the conversation and direct them to talking about how they're sleeping. Ms. T says, yep, sounds familiar. In my friend group, it was Mary Kay Cosmetics. Exactly. That kind of thing. I remember my stepdad was really trying to sell, I can't remember the name of it now, but it had like America in the name. And it was the sort of thing that by the time he was ready to start selling that, I had come out of my Avon thing a few years earlier, and it was throwing off all sorts of red flags for me, but I just didn't really have the heart to say anything because honestly, when you're in the midst of something like this, it is very difficult to hear that own your own business and make all this money isn't real. You've put a lot of your energy into it. You've got your hopes up. And anybody who tries to tell you it's not going to work that way, it's going to sound like they're just a hater instead of talking good sense and trying to keep you from like fucking up. So this conversation, he initially tries to do the like, how you been sleeping, man? And this dude says, oh, actually really well. I've been using melatonin. And that's not the answer he wanted. He wanted that the guy had been sleeping badly. And instead of like just kind of changing what his tactic was going to be when he realizes he's not going to get the response he was predicting, he decides that, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I am just going to pretend that he said what I wish he had said. So interrupts with, yeah, I hear you, man. I was sleeping terribly. And every time that he brings this up, they move on and start talking about the game or start talking about the hockey that they were watching. And he keeps just basically steamrolling over whoever's speaking, talking about how his back used to really hurt. His neck was all fucked up. But now he has this pillow that has changed everything. And again, tries to make it very like as if it's a spur of the moment thing. He's going, oh man, what was the name of that pillow? Hold on, let me go find it. As if it's not part of the whole plan. And he does his spiel and then does that thing that they do that I was also trained to do. And that I have had used on me quite successfully, actually, in the past. Because I am a mark. And I will not lie, you guys. I would love to say that I'm really savvy about these kinds of things. And I've gotten more so because I'm just getting older and I understand how it works more. But I really fell for the ordinarily it's this price, but right now it's this for quite a while. And it hasn't, it's only been like after the internet has shown me how many places are perpetually on sale, or I don't shop there anymore, but Hobby Lobby used to do a thing where things were 50% off, except they were always marked up 50% first. So, and I started to like get wise to exactly how this all worked. But way back in the day, it's ordinarily this price, but I'm going to be able to give it to you today for 25% less. That hit. And I was a fool and I would spend my money. So he does that. And this is when the dudes are all, first of all, like, are you fucking kidding me? It's a pillow. And it's how much? And just for the record, I mean, a $50 pillow is not really like, if you're talking a really particular kind of pillow, that's worth it. I'm just going to say, as somebody who has grown to have an entire fucking like sort of, I'm trying to think of the way. I hesitate to use this word because it makes it sound kind of gross, but I have sort of a nest that I've built in my bed. So I have one of those big U-shaped pregnancy pillows, which is basically like two body pillows sewn together. And I have this, and it has changed the entire game for me. And that pillow was probably around $50, but granted, it's like 6 times the size of the one he's selling. And ever since getting that and feeling how completely it changes my sleep, it's the sort of thing where now when I get in bed and I have a pillow under my knees and that like circling my body, I get into bed and immediately am in the perfect position and do not need to move. And I wake up hours later if I have to pee or because my alarm goes off, and I haven't moved at all since the moment I got into the bed. It is absolutely changing my entire game. And so just to say, I believe that if you decide you're going to invest in really nice stuff for sleep, that it makes a difference. I don't think this is just an outright scam. It may be a scam. I mean, I'm not saying it's not, but good pillows and the difference between a good and bad pillow, that's very real. And I highly recommend, if you are somebody who is on a budget but you want to upgrade a little bit, IKEA has some really surprisingly affordable, like nice loft pillows. And also, if you go to a hotel and you have pillows that you really like, take a photo of the label and you can find them to buy. I've done this before as well, and it has been really like great. So Asher says, my wife is the same way. If she didn't have to share the bed, she'd surround herself with stuffed animals and pillows. Yeah, Owen has the same pregnancy pillow. So both of us have this like sort of barrier between the two of us when we get into bed, which kind of sucks because we like want to be able to cuddle and stuff still. But, you know, it's so helpful for us both for sleep that we've just been like, oh, well, we're old and this is how it's going to work from now on, I guess. So, you know, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that this actually did help him. And considering that his wife also wanted to buy one, I'm going to guess it does do something. I know that there's a pillow by Purple. Owen and I have a Purple mattress that, for a story I won't get into, we wound up getting on a massive discount, brand new. And there is a pillow that goes with it, and that pillow is $100. And Owen has been kind of like lusting after that pillow for quite a while now. I've been thinking about getting it for him for Christmas, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford it this year because the puppies have basically wrecked me. And it's also, for those who don't know, the Purple pillow weighs like 25 pounds. It's wild. Anyway, the thing is that what he shows Laszlo later is that he has bought like 3 pallets worth of these pillows. And I think when we find out how much it was something like 14 grand. Something really, this man is going to wind up with no wife because he has spent all of their money in 2 different cases on basically what amount to gambles. And I this is just agonizing to watch him do this. So when his friends rightfully are like, you're going to ambush us and try to get us to buy this pillow, and then not even just leave it with us buying it. You want us each to buy like 30 of them and try and offload them to our own people. And one of the guys says that same line that a lot of folks do, which is, all of my friends are in this room. Basically, who am I going to sell to? And this is something that, especially with like the culture of MLMs becoming more like people being more aware of it, you used to, if you had like a desk job, you used to be able to just drop a catalog in the break room for whatever with your business card stapled to it. And if somebody was interested, they would come find you and place an order with you. Nowadays, that's really frowned upon a lot more. And doing things like having Tupperware parties and Avon parties, they are not as encouraged or seen as an actual, oh, it could be a fun time and also I buy stuff. It is just agony to everybody, just the thought of it. Rightfully so. It's very fascinating to me to think of a time when this was something that was fun for people and genuinely like, oh, well, we had a good time and we bought some Tupperware. I just have to imagine that this was like a period in which women were not allowed to work or do much of anything else, and they had all the time to kill in the middle of the afternoon, and they would go and get sloshed and spend some money, and it was just like a thing to break up the day. But regardless, this whole thing is so hard to watch because, like I said, he had just lost so much money in the last episode with the casino, and now he's here and he is getting brought to small claims court because he owes this man that he bought them from money and isn't able to pay him back because he hasn't been able to offload them. So Laszlo offers to represent him in court in a sequence that, as Asher has said, is very, very cringy. He not only does not really know what he's doing in a modern court, but also there's a real feeling of I don't want to say that he doesn't care what happens, because he certainly believes that Shawnee shouldn't pay this money. He wants to help his friend. He is doing his best here. But he seems more interested as the scene goes on in like joking around in a very like personal way with his bud and not actually doing the job itself. So he comes in, first of all, with the judge's wig on, which is still a thing in the UK. And I absolutely cannot with the fact that the UK still does this. What the ever-loving fuck is the deal with that? Truly. I mean, I want to know why. It's 2022, kids. Are we? Yes, we are. We absolutely are. I can't believe it. It's bonkers to me. So he comes in with this, and the judge says something that, about, like, is this a Hamilton thing? And he says that his attire cannot be discriminated against, and he cites a particular, like, passage of some, and it turns out that Colin Robinson checked into this, and this is a real thing. And Colin is performing his role as paralegal and brings in all of these documents, but we find out that they're just like crates of pornography. There's not even anything actually relevant. So how Laszlo decides he's going to open with his argument here is pointing out that the what is the word? The claimant, I guess, would be the word, has the hair of a pedophile. And that is like all we see until we jump to him saying objection. And we find out that he just says it. He does not know what it means. It doesn't seem like he understands the context it's supposed to be used in. And this judge just sort of seems like puzzled in a way that's disbelieving. There's just a dubious quality to the fact that this guy's in the fucking room. This is when he says, "May I approach the bitch?" And Shawnee, like, giggles behind him. "May I approach the bench? What did you think I said?" This is what I'm saying. You know, he's doing this in a way that feels like it's just for the entertainment, but it doesn't feel like he's really trying to win the case. It just feels like, I'm going to make a big show of like an attempt to help my friend so that he feels like I'm supporting him because I want to be supportive, but I'm not going to put real effort into doing this. And he wraps up talking about how, "I'm just going to say that everybody deserves their day in court and a slice of a fair system." And the judge basically says, "Yeah, okay, that's fine. I rule in favor of the plaintiff." That's the one. So they lost. And now Shawnee owes this man, it looks like, $12,000. And I don't believe that we get any resolution to that this episode. Correct me if I'm wrong and I missed it because of what else starts going on. But it looks like that's just the end of the story for Shawnee, is that he now owes 12 grand. And here's my idea. What I want Laszlo to do is offer to help Shawnee sell them and use his hypnotism abilities on people and get them to buy them. And just stand like on a street corner at random and hypnotize people and be like, "Do you want to spend $40 on a pillow?" And I feel like it would just be a matter of time. If you did that, you know, every day for like 2 or 3 hours, you would eventually get through that entire pallet. You would just have to make sure to move around the city and stay ahead of the cops, because obviously selling pillows on the corner is frowned upon. But in New York, you can really get away with doing that sort of thing for a bit before they like catch up with you if you're careful about it. Go down into a subway or something, you know? So that's my idea. I think that we really should revisit this and have Laszlo use his abilities somehow. Now, the thing is, can he do that in front of Shawnee? No, because then it gives away what he can do. That said, just tell Shawnee, "Give them to me, and I'll come back in so many hours with money." And Shawnee would do that because he's an idiot and he gave him his fucking credit card before with no questions asked. So it would be fine. It would totally work. So that's my assertion on what the next like steps should be. So he comes home drunk, and it turns out that he went and drank the blood of a bunch of finance guys who had gotten drunk. And he is collapsing. He is barely able to hold himself together. And he came home with Shawnee, which is like particularly risky. It's less risky than it would be with a lot of people because Shawnee is not too bright. He's looking around and says something about how y'all must do a lot of antiquing, but he isn't getting really how suspicious this entire thing is. And this is the part where Guillermo winds up getting an idea. So I'm going to backtrack now to the situation with Nandor and Nadja. They are again fighting over the throne. And what Guillermo has decided to do, oh my God, I forgot about this. There is a fucking human resources video that they have to watch, and it's like required mandatory viewing. And they have those like little people in their black cloaks and everything come in and set it up. And it is just some guy who says, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," which I'm pretty sure that this is supposed to be like a reference to something in particular. that's like allegedly the Satanist credo, something like that. But I don't remember. I didn't look into it, but it's ringing a bell. Regardless, that's all it says. So then Nadja turns to evil Mabel and is like, is that it? And she says, yeah, that just means anything and everything goes. He smacks me on the ass, you finger me, I stroke him off, etc., etc. We have found it to be good for team building, and we try to do that on Thursdays, like putting it all on that same night, because otherwise it really can be very exhausting, which is really, that's kind of like a brilliant thing. It's just like, look, the sexual harassing, we're all vampires, we're all horny, and we all are just sort of like pan and don't really have any I was going to say no standards. That's not fair. We don't have any limits. Tends to be the way it seems to work for a lot of vampires. We all would just be like getting up to stuff all the time. So we've decided to condense it and just like basically have orgy day once a week. And that's really the easiest way for us to take care of this. I'm like, honestly, that sounds like it makes a lot of sense. Feels productive, feels like efficient. Okay. But anyway, back to Guillermo. What he wants to do here is figure out how to manipulate Nandor and Nadja in such a way that they each are inadvertently giving him their power. And at first it kind of looks like it would work. So he advises Nandor to let Nadja have the throne. He says power is won by those who seem to least desire it. Nandor says, but I want it. I want to sit on the throne. And he says, and you will. And I love when he says, and you will, he begins to sort of like stroke Nandor's cape. And Nandor immediately is like, stop touching me. And this is so great because it's a real like send up of, in the blurb that I put out when I was about to record this episode, I said that he's trying to Lady Macbeth both of them. Because that's, the classic of somebody who's sort of off to the side, not actually themselves in power, but whispering and influencing. And the whole, they are leaning very close and touching your clothing. If it's a woman, oftentimes there'll be sort of a sexual aspect, like she is using her wiles and her sensuality to influence a man. There is a scene in The Walking Dead where they have Lori doing this, I feel like with Shane, because I remember there is a period there where she's with Shane. And it is the most over-the-top, ridiculous attempt to have her seem like she's sort of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like a mastermind. And, just... So I just really liked this because it specifically reminded me of that scene in The Walking Dead, which has just lodged itself in my brain as a particularly bad representation of this trope. And so eventually Nandor decides that he is going to take Guillermo's advice. And off to the side, Guillermo is talking to the camera about who's the one who sits the throne? Is it the one who's actually on the throne or the one who whispers into both their ears? And I really enjoy him saying that and then smiling at the camera while they have this extremely dramatic torchlight on him so that half his face is in shadow. And it's a moment of real victory for Guillermo. And I know it's not going to last because, Guillermo's not allowed to have anything nice. He's not allowed to win. It's just not going to happen for him, really. But I really enjoyed just this moment of him being quite smug, because, maybe it's not going to work forever. But if he, sort of backs off and then tries again in a few days. I feel like this is something that he could figure out a delicate balance and make it work. Asher's in the chat. If I'm not mistaken, Do What Thou Wilt is part of the 20th century occult spiritualism movement in the U.S. And then they said, yes, I've looked it up. If you want to learn more, look up Aleister Crowley and the Book of the Law. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law is a direct quote from that book, which he wrote and became the religious spiritual doctrine of that particular movement. Apparently that sentiment dates back to the 6th century as well. Okay, cool. Aleister Crowley is one of those names that I always like forget and then come back and I'm like, oh, that guy, right. I just forget how influential he was. What a weirdo. So Nadja sits on the throne and she gets very salty about the fact that she doesn't get to be the one to announce that the Chamber of Judgment is beginning. And she's sitting on the throne, standing next to Nandor. And despite the fact that the throne is on like a dais, he is so tall that when she's seated beside him, his face is actually higher up than hers. He has height on her still. And it makes her really uncomfortable that even though she's sitting here, she doesn't actually preside over the room in the way she imagines she should. So they're in the middle of this like symbolic dance and she calls a halt and all of the dancers have to like return to their starting positions because she doesn't like sitting here. And what Guillermo does is maybe we should just remove the throne from the equation, which I thought was kind of an interesting choice because if they take the throne out of the equation, Nadja is still going to be shorter than Nandor is. So it doesn't actually like solve the problem, but I guess it's really the symbolism of it that is what's most important. It felt to me like practically speaking, you're in the same place you were, but they move the throne back, driving some deep gouges in the floor as they do so. They start the ceremony of judgment again. And this time, Evil Mabel is the one who calls a halt to it because she feels like the throne just sitting there with nobody on it looks really stupid. And this is when Guillermo just decides he does this. Well, I have an idea. No, never mind. I have so many things to do today. And they fall for it. It is so poorly done, and they still fall for it. Why don't we put me in the robe, and I'll sit on the throne? I'm not a vampire, but they don't know that. And I think, the symbolism will hold. And they all seem to think this is a really good idea. Nandor even calls it an elegant solution, which, I guess it's like, they do know you're not a vampire though, don't they? Like, they're right there. They're not really out of, maybe they are. I don't know. I think they know though. And he is behaving as if the fact that he gets to sit on the throne is actually meaningful in some way. Like, it affords him genuine power just to sit there, which we know it certainly doesn't. They still wind up ruling the way they decide to. And he's like still whispering in their ear, but he was doing that without being on the throne to begin with. So it's all, again, it's all very symbolic, but it's not really accomplishing anything in particular. And he pulls the hood over his head in like the most dramatic fashion. It is truly hilarious. And again, acts like he's really won when I'm like, you're not doing anything though. So then the dance commences and he's on the throne, delighted, kicking his feet like a baby in a high chair. Like, it is really something. And they have the first people that are brought in who, I love this, they have the wraiths wear these like extra scary masks for the ceremonies of judgment. And one of them is just wearing the scream mask. And I love when she says something like, every time with that one. I think the masks look like gopher masks or something that's like very rodent-like. I don't know, but they were quite creepy. I will give them that. So this dude that they bring in, he was selling an herb that he alleged kept vampires safe from the effect of sunlight. And I love Nadja saying, oh, that would be nice. And Evil Mabel says it would be nice if it worked. And they bring in a fucking trolley with a TV on it, like an old-fashioned tube TV. And the whole setup here is just bringing me to 9th grade in the summertime when there's no more left of the school curriculum, but you have to finish the rest of the school year. And so your teacher is just going to make you watch one movie after another until the fucking year is done. And we see a couple of vampires that were in like a, what looks to be like an RV, and they step outside into the sun and they are on fire. And at one point, Nandor says, how did you get this footage? And she says the crow cam and points up to a crow that is carrying a camera in its beak. I am in love with this idea, and I'm really hoping that the fact that they have introduced the crow cam means that we get to see more footage from the crow cam in the future, because this is just rife with possibilities. There is so much that can be done. My favorite thing too about this footage is that the couple that has stepped outside and is clearly on fire, there are like 4 more people that continue stepping out into the sun despite the fact that the folks in front of them are on fire. And they all just ignore that their friends are already lit, and they are like, oh, it'll still work for me though. And they just keep coming out into the sun. These goons. So this is vampicide. But Nandor says, I think it might be nice for us to start our reign off by showing some mercy. And I was really surprised at the fact that Nadja agrees with this and says we're going to just lock him in a cell somewhere for 500 years. And then Nandor says 100. She says 150. And I think, is it Guillermo that interrupts and says something like 2 years is fine? Because he chimes in at one point. And just 2 is good. And I don't know if his voice is being actually heated in any way. He's talking as if they're going to take his like judgment into account here. Is that happening? Like, is it? So then they bring in this dude in a very like prince-like ruffled shirt, and he has a hood over his head, and when they pull it off, it's Derek, who was one of the members of the Mosquito Club that Guillermo had joined. And I had been wondering what was going on with these guys. He had been left behind in that house, and he gets turned, apparently. But it looks like nobody actually teaches him how to be a vampire, what the rules are. And this is something that I really enjoy. The idea of like, and we have a little bit of this with Nadja, who had turned that student and sort of bails for a while, and this poor girl doesn't know what's happening to her, and then Nadja shows up and like explains to her how to hunt and kill. But what happens when you are turned and sort of left to your own devices, and you don't have somebody like guiding you? There's no mentorship, you know? And this dude Derek is genuinely like, tell me what the rules are. and I'll do it. It's fine. I just don't know what I'm doing. I am quite new to this, actually. And I had a little sympathy for him because, like, that is quite a change to go through. And I can't say, the first thing he's accused of is turning into a bat on the subway to scare some teenagers, which I'm not really mad at. And the second one is stealing IV bags from blood donor centers across the city. But this is when Nadja chimes in with, also, what are you wearing? That is bad vampire fashion, and that is the most heinous crime. And he's like, well, I went to Hot Topic, and like, they've got some good stuff. I don't know. And then feeding on bystanders out in the open who have fallen asleep on park benches. Owning an unlicensed hellhound. And I love this. When we find out what the hellhound is, it's literally just a golden retriever. A very sweet, obedient golden retriever. Now, he sounds vicious, and the cage he's in shakes quite violently. And there's a suggestion later that maybe this dog is only listening to Guillermo because of the fact that it has like the blood in him of Van Helsing, and that somehow influences the way this dog behaves. And honestly, like, I don't hate that as an explanation. The idea that maybe this golden retriever that seems so docile and chill and ordinary actually is a hellhound who is a maniac and kind of a killer. I'm into it. I kind of like that idea. So that's fine. But there's just a lot about poor Derek's situation. And when they mention the feeding of people on park benches, he says something like, well, what's the alternative? Again, like, he doesn't know what to do. So Nadja and Nandor are much harsher on him than they were on the first guy who was actually responsible for the deaths of other vampires, because they feel, okay, the first one was to show mercy, and now the second one we get to just go fucking hard on him. And I love when they ask, what do you have to say for yourself? And Derek just says, whoops. And Guillermo attempts to step in and be like, he must have an explanation. I'm sure there was something else he intended to say. But he just says, I just do fucked up shit now. That's just who I am. And this was fascinating to me. And look, it's going to make me sound really cold-blooded. But Guillermo is so worried about what's going to happen to Derek. And like, I get it. A lot of that is fueled by the fact that Guillermo feels guilty over the fact that Derek was left behind, that he couldn't save Derek. And so he feels a sort of responsibility to save him now because he didn't succeed the first time. But all that said, this dude is so incompetent, sir. You can put all of your energy into trying to save him, and it's going to last like 3 minutes because he's just going to go out there and do some crazy other stuff that is going to get him in trouble. Like, later on, he doesn't even know to stay out of the sun, which truly, the Mosquito Club's whole deal was like knowing the weaknesses of vampires so that you can exploit them and kill them. And he doesn't even seem aware of the necessity to stay out of the sun. What are you doing then? What is this? You know what I'm saying? Like, so I just kept sort of being like, Guillermo, I really get it in terms of like your burden that you're carrying and just trying to make yourself feel better. But you're just sort of postponing the inevitable here. In my opinion, Derek is not long for this world. They're charging him of all of these crimes, and the only thing he has to say for himself is, whoops, and I do fucked up shit now. I don't really see a future in which he starts making better decisions all of a sudden. You know, like, I just don't see it. So, yeah, they sentence him to be thrown into the well of daylight. And Guillermo is horrified and decides that he is going to step in and try and help him, and goes to see him. It's a really amazing series of like conversations that he has with Nandor and Nadja, because he goes and talks to Derek and is apologizing for the fact that he left him behind. And Derek really does not argue with him. He's just, or doesn't, I won't say he doesn't argue it, because Derek does say like, it wasn't your fault. He doesn't blame Guillermo, but he does say something about how, I wish that you had maybe looked me up and explained what was going, like what the rules are. But again, Derek, you should know what the rules are. If you've been, like, you went into the house to kill them, you should know literally anything. And also, I am assuming Guillermo did the same thing I did, which was to simply assume, wrongly, that Derek was dead, that they didn't turn him. Because the choice to turn someone into a vampire and not just kill them, that's a pretty rare thing to do, especially to a person that they've only just met. So the fact that Derek is turned in the first place is really surprising. Just the whole way that this goes, you know. So anyway, Guillermo winds up going to Nandor and Nadja and trying to plant it in both of their minds that they each were influenced unduly by the other, and that people are talking about how weak they are. Because for Nandor, he says, Nadja talked you into killing that Derek guy. And he's like, I didn't let her talk me into anything. And he says, well, you let her steamroll you. And as he does this, he's sort of like brushing Nandor's jacket in a way that's, when he's over his shoulder like this, is supposed to be, oh, I'm so influential. But Nandor just literally walks away and leaves him standing there. And then when he goes to Nadja, he says, people have been saying you just sentenced that Derek guy to death because you let Nandor walk all over you. And I love Nadja. Have a fucking day off, Guillermo. No one said that. Please do not talk anymore. I just really adore her absolute certainty. Yeah, that didn't happen. Good for you, girl. Appreciate you. I wish that I would be as certain of myself that I wouldn't believe it when somebody tried to plant this sort of thing in my head, but it would worm its way in. I know it would. It would influence me, and I would be like very salty. And he says something about how I think I really biffed this one. And I was like, just for comfort, because of everything going on with the puppies and feeling desperately overwhelmed, I was listening to the audiobooks for the Chronicles of Narnia, because those are like comfort books from when I was a kid. And yes, I know all the Christian imagery, but still comfort books for me. And there is the term muffed like when he says I biffed this one, they say I muffed this one. And I find it very fascinating, the different terminology we have for like just screwing it up, you know? So what he decides to do is take this very drunk Laszlo in and have him be representation for Derek. And of course, because Laszlo has this relationship with Nadja, despite the fact that he is so drunk that he literally passes out in front of them without making any argument whatsoever, Nadja is just like, I think it would be really nice if we just let Laszlo have this one. So they let Derek go by virtue simply of the fact that Laszlo is allegedly representing him, even though I am not convinced that Laszlo even knows what the fuck is going on here. And I do enjoy as well that Colin rolls in with that fucking set of documents again of useless pornography that is totally irrelevant to anything. And also the fact that what Guillermo is trying to say happened with Derek. He says something about how Derek escaped and it was like a complete shock to everybody. And Derek just starts to say, what are you talking about? You're the one who helped me. And Guillermo has to be like, shut the fuck up. And I'm like, truly, again, this is what I'm saying, Guillermo. Derek is going to die. He's just gonna, because you're putting effort into a guy who is not putting the same effort into saving his own life. You're doing more for him than he's doing for himself. And there's just only so much you can do, sir. It really, you know? So, yeah. Nandor, fine. I don't even care at this point. Release the prisoner. And Guillermo is like so delighted. And this is when he decides he's just going to go over to the cage with the hellhound in it and open it up and let this adorable golden retriever out, and shows to everybody that he can make him like sit and stand and give him his paw and yada, yada, yada. And it's great. Oh my God, you guys, I'm realizing that there is a post-credit scene that I think I missed. Oh my God. Oh my God. Derek is selling the guy pillow. He uses his mesmerizing to sell it. Guys, I missed this. Oh, I'm so excited. He doesn't even command him to buy it. He's commanding him to not be a dick about it or whatever is the way he phrases it to this guy. Because the dude says, no, not interested, and just starts to close the door. I hereby command you or whatever to not be a dick about this right now. He doesn't even make him buy it. Oh, Derek. Come on, baby, you can go a little further than that. Oh, that's delightful. I can't believe that I missed this. As soon as the credits started to roll after Guillermo had the puppy with him, I immediately was like, okay, end of episode. And I don't like, there have been post-credit scenes before, so I don't know why I didn't stop and like let it play out a little longer, but it was really fun to see that scene while I was recording, I have to say. So it worked out. Oh, how exciting. I love that. Great. Good for you, Derek. Maybe being a door-to-door salesman at night is the way to go. And you can also probably feed on people pretty easily this way. All right. I'm going to wrap up, but thank you again very much to Kyle for commissioning this. Oh, Asher's in the chat says, I didn't even know about that scene. I'm glad that I wasn't the only one who missed it because I felt like a real dodo bird, but good. Okay. So we both had a little treat. Yay. And yeah, we will be back on track. So then the next episode will be on Tuesday, December 6th. So until then, everybody, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.